So yeah, I may as well just get started, kind of introducing all of the speakers today. So I'll probably start with Claire. So what is your role and how might you work with early childhood services?
Yeah, so I'm clinical services manager with Umbo. So I look after therapists across our teams, but since we've grown, I'm kind of looking after the managers of the therapists. So my background is speech therapy. And so the way that our team works with early childhood educators is kind of a variety of ways. So some of our therapists do sessions while children are at kinder or preschool or equivalent. Some of our therapists will be doing some work or training or liaising with early childhood educators as part of their work with clients who might be doing their sessions at home. So it can look a little bit different. It really depends on the needs of the client. So we try to work as collaboratively as we can. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's my role.
Yeah, and then I'll move on to Erin. I just want to explain your role and how you might work with early childhood services.
Okay, so I am a support coordinator under the NDIS, and I'm based in rural New South Wales, where we have limited access to face-to-face therapies. So I would work with early childhood services in supporting their families and children in their services to access and refer to supports under the NDIS, utilising their NDIS plans.
And then finally, I'll go with to Jeannie. Can you just explain your role and how you might work with the early childhood services?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Jeannie. I'm a speech pathologist at Umbo, and I've been working there for about a year. I work with early childhood services by providing therapy. Sometimes I do that in preschools, sometimes I do that directly with families via telehealth, and sometimes I do that by providing support for support workers or allied health assistants that are working with the children that I see. And sometimes I do that by providing support programs, just some ideas and some strategies for the teachers or the educators that work with my clients.
Nice. Jared might come in a little bit, so I'll circle back round to that. Maybe in the meantime, Claire, do you want to? So basically, Erin and Jared are kind of partners with Umbo. They're support coordinators, kind of independent, but they work with Umbo. I don't know, Claire, do you want to explain maybe how you guys work together?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So Umbo's probably had a relationship with Jared and Erin probably spanning about the same time frame. I'm not sure, Erin, maybe about the past 12 or more months. So
yeah, probably coming on 2 years, Claire.
Oh, 2 years, right? Yeah, time flies. So the organisation that Jared works for, having, as per a lot of rural communities, lots of difficulties with staff retention of their allied health staff, and I can't exactly recall, but they came across Umbo and asked if we could start providing some of the allied health services. So Jared is an allied health assistant and they have other allied health assistants. So we work with their clients in kind of some different combinations in different ways. And then we work with Erin. Erin refers clients to us as well who she thinks could be a good match for online therapy, and then helps to set up other supports around that online therapy. Some people are able to do the therapy just by themselves getting online. Other people might require a bit more support to get onto calls and that kind of thing. So Erin is kind of liaising with people on the ground at her end to facilitate the online sessions with us. So there's lots of communication between us about different clients, and then maybe if we need to change things or change the way that we're doing the therapy with them. So the way that we work with Jared, he sees some clients, like he sees a client with Jeannie, for example. she sees the client once a week and then talks to Jared, and then he sees the client another day of the week. Other clients, Jared will sit in the session while our therapist is there as well. So we really do things in kind of different kinds of ways. I may not have fully captured our relationship there, Erin, if you wanted to add anything.
I think you've done pretty well to cover it all. I guess the role for me is to do the initial referral and ensure that Umbo have all the information required to allocate the appropriate supports and the appropriate therapist to start that program.
So I think like kind of, I guess part of the message that I was getting there was like, you know, therapists might see someone one day a week and then someone else will see them another day of the week, but it's kind of like, it's good to get that continuity, and then being able to kind of work with the educators as well is only going to make that even better. I guess so everyone's like kind of on the same page. I know that, you know, we speak about early childhood, early intervention and things like that. And from the educator side, obviously we're kind of preparing people, particularly between, you know, 3 and 5, preparing them for school. So Jeannie, I was going to ask you, why is early intervention so important, particularly for school readiness and kind of early childhood?
Yeah, thanks. We know that if children can transition to school with a certain level of school readiness, that transition's much easier, that they can access the education that they're being provided with in a better way, and that they form better social relationships with their peers at school. So it is really critical that we get children ready for school so that they can make that transition really well. We know from research that early intervention is the most efficient way of mitigating any difficulties children might have, and of giving them the skills they need to actually be able to transition to school really successfully. So, you know, that time period is absolutely critical.
There's another link. There's an email from Jack.
Erin.
Sorry, I'm trying to get Jared on.
Okay.
No worries.
Just mute yourself.
Sorry, Jack, did that answer that? Did that give you some?
Yeah, no, definitely. If anyone's got any questions, please go in the chat and just ask whenever, and I'll try and butt in whenever I can. So yeah, I think I guess as well, like how is it for children in kind of like regional and rural communities, like to actually access that before they start school, from the time that, you know, a potential support need is identified?
I can jump in there. So yeah, a lot of the kids that we end up seeing who are from rural and remote areas report waiting 18 months, 2 years, or even we're getting reports now that they can't even get their name on a wait list. Like the wait list is so full that they can't even fit more people on the wait list. So whereas people in metropolitan areas, yes, there are still waits and big demands for allied health, but it seems that people can get access more quickly, typically, than in rural and remote areas. So for some people in particular areas, they might not even have, let alone someone with a wait list, they might not even have that professional there at all. So Erin could probably talk a bit more to that about the kind of allied health around Cowra, allied health therapists. So yeah, sometimes it's just, there's not even an option for people depending on where they live.
Yes, that's right, Claire. So seeing the introduction of telehealth, which has been very, to start with, wasn't easy for clients to grasp, but with support, we've seen that grow, and waiting times reduced, people getting services. We did actually see for the first few years clients not seeing a therapist for the whole duration of their plan. So going back for plan review under the NDIS without reports and without supports in place. So the introduction of telehealth has, really been of major benefit all round.
And to kind of circle back round towards the kind of education side of things, I'll ask this to both Claire and Jeannie. You can decide who wants to go first. I think a big concern amongst some educators, at least some that I've spoken to, is to be able to like facilitate inclusion support. I remember one particular conversation was, you know, if I've got to take a child out a lesson or a learning experience to go and have therapy, and then kind of I've got to integrate them back into that lesson or learning experience, it almost kind of goes against the inclusion support that I'm trying to facilitate. How is online therapy suited to promoting the inclusion support and kind of making that consistent throughout the day?
Gonna fight. Yeah, so at least you know, and this might not be an answer for all online therapy, but definitely the way that Umbo is trying to work is in a very collaborative way that's focused on the client and their family and the support people in their life. So we would really try and work out a way of delivering services that has, you know, the most positive impact possible with the least disruption. So what that could look like might be, for example, selecting the time of day that the session occurs, or sometimes we have parents actually come into the centre to do the session with their child rather than pulling a staff member away for the session if that parent's able to do that. Because then that's less disruptive than pulling the child out, taking them home, doing the session and taking them back, for example. Or it might be that we do a more integrated session where if the educator has an iPad, maybe it's actually doing some activities while the kids are playing with the therapist kind of guiding the educator or the allied health assistant, etc., with the particular activities that they're wanting to work on so that it's more seamless. But maybe Jeannie or Jared could give more tangible examples.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I was just going to jump in there, if it's okay, and give a few examples of the way I do it with some of my clients. Some of them, certainly, we have that pull-out model. Sometimes that works really well. But certainly with some of my clients, I do perhaps one session actually in class, if they've got some there that can support, and we can just watch how they're going in class or in the preschool, you know, environment. Some of them I actually write a program and send that through. And that is delivered not from me at all. I just simply write the program. Sometimes with some sessions, my sessions are just with an early childhood educator, and we discuss the client, discuss where they're at, and talk about different strategies and ways we'll set up some goals, and then talk about the strategies that we can use to try and reach those goals within that preschool or early childhood environment. So there's a real variety of ways that it's done. And I just to sort of add on to what Claire said, we really try and look at the way that it's going to work best for that particular family. And that varies very much from person to person.
Yeah, because I know kind of part of that is the kind of key worker model in terms of obviously identifying you know, a key educator to work with. I'm going to ask my next question to Jared, but I might give you a chance to introduce yourself first and what you do and how you might work with early childhood services.
Apologies for being late. Technology out here today is just a little bit cold, so it doesn't really want to play games, so to speak. I'm an allied health assistant out here, working for a small organisation, so to speak, and just sort of touching base, just even what Jeannie was sort of saying in terms of how we working and how we're starting to even still navigate this this new concept of the telehealth, where I think Jeannie and I have been working really well, and it's sort of still a learning curve. I don't think there's going to be one exact or perfect way that we're going to be able to deliver. It's just sort of something that we're still evolving and still working together with. Yeah, it's enjoyable. It's good fun, and it's great to sort of be able to see progress and development. And Jeannie and I are only just having this conversation in regards to how we sort of start to deliver and how we bring in the teachers' aides that are actually working with these children a lot more than what we are. You know, we sort of only get to see these children for a small limited time during the week for the school week, and there's interruptions, library, sport, and other bits that go on throughout the school. So we were just sort of saying that, you know, it's to try and get the schools more involved in terms of the teachers' aide being able to facilitate the actual session with the therapist, and then obviously the notes and the programs then come through so that someone like myself would be able to then go into the school and deliver added program or add on to the actual session, and then collaborate back with Jeannie or the other therapist to work on where we need to go from there.
Yeah, and how does that help? I'm assuming you've seen this firsthand. Like, how does it help long term to be able to like upskill educators using that, you know, kind of process where you all work together?
Yeah, well, like I said, they're the guys that are there on the ground. They're the ones that are in the classroom for the whole period out on the playground. It gives the teacher a first-hand experience as to what we're all trying to achieve, and with the process and the program, being able to actually, even to the point where ask the therapist right then and there. You know, you might not get that if it was sort of centered based, if the child's been pulled out of school to have to attend the centre like ourselves. Whereas, you know, the therapist's right there. So if they have got a question, if they have got something to ask, there's a great opportunity to be able to do that instead of, you know, the emails, phone calls and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And
could I just jump in, Jack, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure.
I think also something we haven't really talked about is what exactly we mean by telehealth or online. And because I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just a video call and that's the therapy and that's how the therapy happens. But as per Jeannie and Jared's way of working with clients, so yes, some of the sessions occur over video, but then it might be an email or phone call to debrief, to kind of make the next plan. And I think part of what assists in upskilling educators is that sometimes it's actually the fact that the therapist isn't physically there that can kind of help transfer more skills to educators, because it kind of lends itself to a more collaborative partnership where it's not reliant on this one person trotting in one day a week or one day a fortnight. It's really about setting up more detailed plans in some ways, because it relies on more than one person to be steering the ship. I'm not sure if these guys wanted to add something else to that, but I think, yeah, in that way, sometimes just that person, the fact that that person is sort of removed helps with the transfer of skills, because it sort of necessitates it in some ways.
Yeah, and I think kind of long term as well, you know, we spoke about the wait times in, you know, particular areas, and if an educator has managed to get those skills, then a child with a similar support need is currently on a wait list. You can use those skills to kind of you know, support it in certain ways.
If I can just add to that as well, Jack, it's delivering in client context. So gone are the days of removing a child and having to go to a clinical setting. It's upskilling people who are involved in that with that child every day to be able to deliver supports in the child's context. So whether that be in the childcare centre or sometimes in home, and it's delivering regular supports so that is then reinforced every day that that child is in care or in that setting. Which is fabulous for the child. And with the way it used to be delivered, if the child had an appointment every fortnight and that they weren't able to attend a session, that's then a month that child is not receiving that service. So being able to implement every day and reinforce the strategies is fantastic.
And what kind of benefits have you seen for, in particular, like your regional community?
So as tying that back into the NDIS, which is my area, it's an NDIS plan is based around client goals, and it's seeing clients achieve that goal, whether it just be a fraction of progress, but it's still progress, and it's still increasing the capacity of the child to participate and live life how they want to live it. And supporting the families, that's also huge.
So how, I guess the kind of, here we go. We've got a question from Beiro Kindy. Can you be more specific on how you upskill families and educators? Is it sending a plan? Is it information? I don't know who wants to put a hand up to answer this one. Jeannie?
I'll just jump in with an example that I've got at the moment. So I'm working with a little person and I'm actually writing really specific plans. So I write the goal, I write how we could potentially what strategies we could use to facilitate that goal. And then I discuss what strategies we think would work best for that particular person. And then talk about how we collect that information to measure whether or not our goal is successful. And then I see the person who's providing that intervention on the ground in the early childhood centre. I see them once a month and we discuss and go through, and I get feedback, oh, that worked really well, they're doing this really well. And then we renegotiate, work out what we're going to do next, send the plan and go from there. And it's not just that sort of monthly interaction, although, you know, that's the majority of it. That's where we set aside time to actually have a face-to-face meeting. We email each other going, oh, this one didn't work, can you help me with that? And that kind of dialogue just means things are adjusted constantly. So it's working really well. And it's great fun. I'm loving it.
And is there an element of like teaching certain kind of strategies that would help get like therapy outcomes that then could obviously be used towards, you know, future needs, I guess?
Absolutely. And I have sort of had that feedback that the upskilling has meant being able to provide a different level of support for other children that they see.
It carries on through. So you might be learning something that relates to a particular child, but then you can see, oh, this is going to work for this child. So it's, carrying across the whole class.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of goes nicely into my next question regarding, you know, you wouldn't have to kind of double up on the work to learn the same thing twice. I know, like kind of similar to allied health, like in early childhood, like it is massively understaffed, and the kind of documentation requirements mean that a big concern is workload. Claire, could you maybe talk about how online therapy could help the efficiency of an educator who might be working with a child with additional needs?
Yeah, well, I think that previous point about learning skills and strategies that are relevant to more than one child is one efficiency kind of measure. And the other one is, again, going back to the example that Jeannie provided, where we can kind of work out a flow to the provision of therapy that is suitable for the educator. So they might have, for example, planning time or something like that where, you know, the therapist could meet with them. And also we're not necessarily requiring educators to write us lots of notes. Like really the therapist is responsible for writing notes after a session and that kind of thing. But something I didn't mention before was I think the technical term is asynchronous support. So, you know, an educator could actually video the child that you're working with and flick that through to the therapist rather than writing an email about how they've been doing. It's like, this is what they're doing and this is how they're doing it. And so it's really finding those little efficiencies as well and really using the technology to our advantage. And that can also happen in a session, that there could be the educator with the child or a couple of children with a setup where the therapist is kind of coaching them through some different things that they're wanting them to work on. So it can be really integrated into their day, which I think also helps with efficiency rather than, right, we need to do a 2-hour training session with you at 5 p.m. And take your time that you'd be otherwise doing other things. So we really do try and embed the things that we're wanting to work on with the educators and the children as much as possible, so that it's not lots of additional work for them, appreciating all the various pressures and accreditation aspects and compliance pieces that early educators have to fulfill on a daily basis. So yeah, I think using the technology in clever ways helps with that.
Yeah, and I guess like touching on the technology side, I'm not actually sure. I haven't heard of anyone doing this. It seems pretty straightforward to me to think about, but maybe like, you know, I guess it kind of promotes innovation, right? But I guess the overlap between OWNA and Umbo could be, you know, you might even be able to, instead of having to physically send that video to a therapist, we've got like app only permission, right? So a therapist could be added with app only permission to be able to see, you know, things like daily routines, when they sleep, when they eat, things like that, can see certain videos, and then that like that child can only be tagged in it. So obviously the therapist can see that. We can, you know, attach notes and goals and things like that, and creating goals that are, you know, because they're kind of created like custom, can be made towards, you know, therapy goals and also the goals of the, you know, the frameworks and things like that. So we've spoke about the facilitating inclusion support. We spoke about how it kind of helps educators be a bit more efficient. I guess the final thing for me, and probably the most important, is the getting better access. So I'll probably ask this to all of you, but I'll start with Jared and Erin, because obviously you're in the regional communities. How have you seen families get better access through Umbo or through online therapy in general?
So from an NDIS plan utilisation point of view, there's value from the plan around budget utilisation. So you haven't got the costs in a rural area, especially, of transport, of families having to facilitate the meetings outside of the setting, and participants feeling supported holistically using a more collaborative approach, shorter waiting lists, flexible delivery, and going away from the block funding where you're relying on somebody else to allocate your hours. It's client driven, and you're choosing how much you want to utilise that and how much you need, and your capacity as a parent, I guess, and a user to decide what's going to work for you. So it's a real individual approach.
And it also breaks down the barriers. Like, we are out here to access these type of sort of facilities. There's a lot of travel involved. It's not just sort of a 20-minute drive down the road, you know. So we're literally able to pick up the technology and take it to the little towns like we are today, actually. So it's sort of, there's no, it's just taking down the barriers, or transport. Some people might not have the transport. They might not have the means to be able to get to a therapist. So that's eliminates that as well.
And kids are much better at technology than most adults, so it's second nature to them. So that thinking of using technology as being a barrier to supports, I think that the kids can teach us a lot, and they just jump on and they know what to do. So it's part of everyday life for them. Yeah, it's learning the way that they're used to learning. So it's not really anything too different.
And from the therapy side for Claire and Jeannie, like, how have you seen, what you do help families, get better access to that?
I guess the biggest feedback I've had in regards to that is definitely travel, and also overcoming the problem of the extended waiting lists. I've also found flexibility in terms of family life. So if there's a grandparent or an aunt or someone that's looking after the child more, that isn't a problem because they don't actually have to take them anywhere. You're sort of going into their house. That works really well. And also in terms of being child-centered, I do sessions out on the trampoline or with the dog in the backyard, and because the kids can just pick the laptop or the iPad up and take it with you, and I find that has made a big difference for people as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of access, it's also, and I'm from a regional rural area, so I'm not speaking about this from a kind of metro perspective necessarily, but you do find, like, with the recruitment and retention of allied health professionals to rural and remote areas, it's so hard to get them out there. And if you do get them out there, they tend to be early career, newer graduates, whereas we're able, like, Jeannie's an incredibly experienced therapist, that a lot of families wouldn't necessarily get access to her level of expertise if she, because typically the therapists in rural remote areas are younger, earlier graduates. So that's another thing about online therapies. You probably are able to access a higher level of expertise and speciality as well. Like, we have mental health OTs working for us who are city-based. And so that kind of access is great. But I think also getting everyone in the room together is a lot easier when it's online. Like, we have scenarios where the parent joins a session from work while their child is at school or childcare, and then the allied health assistant might be in the room with the child and the therapist is somewhere else. And, to be able to make that happen in face-to-face environment would be really tricky to get all those people at the same, and it kind of wouldn't work either to have that many people physically in a space. So I think, yeah, it really lends itself to a more collaborative approach in a lot of ways. And we're really reliant on people like Jared and Erin with the on the ground relationships to kind of navigate some of those aspects and be the eyes on the ground to tell us different ways of approaching certain clients and those kinds of things. So I think they definitely facilitate the access in another way, and kind of that helps to enhance the online therapy experience.
Adding on to that, Claire, when you mentioned about staff retention and that leading on sorry fellas, but a female dominated industry, the consistency of supports. So we're seeing a high turnover because therapists are going off on mat leave, and this allows for them to continue providing service in a way that that's flexible for them with a newborn baby in the room next door. And so we are seeing those stronger relationships develop and more trust from a family point of view, because they know that they're going to have the same therapist for an extended period of time and not 6 months and continuous turnover and starting again from the beginning again. So it's very positive from that point of view.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we've got about 5 OTs on our team who have 12-month kids around the 12-month age who, have been able to come back to do a couple of days a week from quite early on. So, yeah, that's a really good point.
I just got a question on the chat here from Krista. She says, do you find that children who struggle behaviourally and have social emotional concerns access online support effectively? I don't know who wants to answer.
I can throw something in there. I collaborate with behaviour support practitioners as well from an NDIS point of view, and it's positive in that it's not necessarily the child who has to sit there and behave. It can be working around the child with everybody who has something to do with that child, from family, from childcare workers, from teachers, therapists, any support workers, anybody involved. So it allows, it doesn't have to be specific to the child having to sit in front of a laptop.
Yeah, I think there was when I first got introduced to Umbo, there was a story which was kind of, I guess it kind of spoke to the access and to the Jeannie mentioned child-centered, and that might expand on that a bit through this example. So there was a child in a rural town called Amelia. That wasn't a real name, but just for the purposes of this story. So it was like a fly-in, fly-out therapist. They kind of come into the town, identified support needs, gave some strategies, and then left town. So the family were kind of left with more on their plate, but like not much knowledge of how to deal with it. And then they accessed Umbo's support, and instead of, I guess, the typical thought of what online therapy is or telehealth is, like face to face, the child sitting there, but and working towards these arbitrary goals of, like, let's say if it's speech, it's like, oh, I want them to say these words. It was more about kind of identifying where these support needs come from. So I think it was something along the lines of the child was having a meltdown when they were going to the car each morning, and instead of working on, like, trying to support certain things in speech, it was identifying that the reason was because she couldn't figure out like what everyone was doing each day, because sometimes it was like different workplaces, different siblings going to school and stuff. So they worked with the family and very rarely actually spoke to the child at all, and worked out a plan from there, which obviously, yeah, you've kind of got the access part of it, but then the other part of it is that child centered. They worked towards the goal of the family, which was to stop the meltdowns so that it was easier. And it was there was like a travel toy and a puzzle waiting for her at school, and then once the meltdowns had stopped, it was easier to support everything. So I guess that kind of fits all that kind of stuff in, behaviorally child centered, and the kind of access and things like that. That was a very long-winded way. It was a year ago when I heard that story, so I remember most of it.
I think, again, the flexibility and the way that you set it up. So, and I think that's the other beauty of online therapy, how I was saying it necessitates collaboration. I think it also helps us to debunk some ideas about what the therapy relationship is, and that the therapist isn't the person with the magic wand who comes in and does the session once a week or once a fortnight and fixes the stuff, because really it's families and educators who are with kids the most frequently. So if we can give them ideas and work with them as a team to kind of build up different little strategies and the way the day might flow and the way we might manage certain situations, then it's really them implementing those things every day that ultimately makes the difference. And as therapists, we're really kind of the coach and the cheerleader and okay, so that didn't quite work, let's try this now. And so it's really trying to build up the people who are key to that child's life. It doesn't need the kid in front of the laptop or it might be that the child's there for 10 minutes and then it's the parent for 20 minutes or the educator for 20 minutes. Or so we've got to be really flexible. If we are prescriptive about the way that we do this, like we can't have a cookie cutter approach. We've really got to do it child by child and situation by situation.
seeing the child in context is, families feel a lot more supported in that the therapist can actually see the child and have more understanding of what is going on in there every day. Seeing a child behave and sit nicely in a clinical setting doesn't really lend itself to getting a great picture of what is actually going on.
Yeah, I might just, so we've obviously shared some knowledge and stuff, and I know sometimes it's hard to, when you've got expertise in one area, to be able to kind of lend it across in a small session like this. So what kind of services do or can Umbo offer to early childhood services, Claire?
Sorry. Yeah, we can provide support to children who have NDIS plans. We have some, and it's kind of like this, and by support, the various ways of providing support that we've kind of discussed so far. So that can be support to educators, families, as well as directly to the children. And also we have some different partnerships with certain like preschools and things, where the preschool has a bucket of funding that helps them to prioritize children who might require support. So we provide the support, and the preschool pays for that for families who are unable to afford it or they don't have an NDIS plan. We're also really happy to provide training on certain topics as is relevant to sort of our professional areas of speech and OT in the early childhood space. And also kind of, I guess, with our experience of such a positive experience of working with people like Erin and Jared, of talking to the way that sort of model, and well, I say model, but it's really, yeah, like Jared was saying before, an evolving process and really variable client by client as to how we configure what it looks like. But also, yeah, maybe talking about the experience of working with allied health assistants and whether that might be an option for some early education spaces, because we've definitely found this sort of working partnership really positive. So we're learning all the time, and I think because Jared also works with a few of our therapists, each therapist works differently as well. So it's pretty variable. So yeah, in terms of what Umbo can provide, it's pretty varied, and we can cater it to the needs of the centre or the service or the child.
Yeah, obviously if you've got any more questions, jump in the chat, or maybe what I might do is if anyone wants to kind of stay and chat to, I don't know, Claire, if you've got time to stay on for the next kind of 5-10 minutes, and anyone, you can unmute yourself or turn your video on if you want that kind of face-to-face chat or interaction. I'm just going to make you the host here, because yeah, we may as well make our time a bit more useful, I guess. But yeah, for anyone that's happy with what you've heard today, doesn't need to hear more, I guess we can call that a day. Thanks a lot for Erin, Jared, Jeannie and Claire for jumping on. And yeah, it was nice to do something different. So yeah, hopefully we can work with these again soon. But yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Jack.
Well done.
Jack.
See you later.